were due to have Rajeev from Fidelis. As those of you who are familiar with the investment scene might know, when a limited partner calls you for a meeting, you go, even if it's your wife's birthday. And therefore, he actually had a meeting with a limited partner, so he's actually gone. So he sends his apologies. Gentlemen, welcome. We're going to have a few more mics coming on stage. And hopefully they'll work. Takshan, you're wired up, aren't you?
Yeah, I think
yeah, good, very good. I work a fair bit with startups, and one of the key things they always talk about is the elevator pitch, 30-second elevator pitch. Maybe if I could sort of swap it around and ask you guys to give a 30-second introduction to yourselves, to the audience, keeping in mind these guys are actually in the content, commercial, and brand space rather than from looking at IRRs and all that kind of stuff. William, you want to take it away?
My first, sorry, I lost my voice. So my first Music Matters was the first one after it kind of came back, was at 05, 06. And I found out the content business was basically fundamentally broken. It didn't have an economic model. So I've been trying to invest in technology-driven companies to try and help change that and allow creators to actually be able to make a living. So we've got 8 music-related companies in our portfolio. Probably the most successful company that we backed at the angel stage was Harmonix, which created Guitar Hero and Rock Band, or was it Garage Band?
Yep.
Rock Band, Garage Band, anyway.
Garage Band, yeah.
So, about $4 billion in sales. And that actually drove quite a lot of royalty revenue back to the artists, well, the labels, and then hopefully some trickled back to the artists. But for us, we went quite in early, $450,000 invested, and we made about $50 million off of it. So that's early today. We've got a company called EscapeX, which allows artists to have their own social platform because, Google, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, they don't really pay shit to the artists. So the artists will then drive their fans to their own app, and any money that comes off the app, they get 70% of that money. So they've signed 380 artists with a social following of 3.8 billion fans across Instagram and Facebook and other platforms. And they're doing millions of dollars a month in revenue, and again, 70% of that goes to the artists.
Excellent. Takshan, long way to come, 16-hour flight. Welcome to Singapore.
Tak Miyata, running a venture fund in San Francisco called Scrum Ventures. And we do invest in the tech startup from AI, autonomous vehicle, robotics, e-commerce, and now sports. And then started investing in the U.S., but now shifting to the Asian market now. We also partner with a big company to connect with the startups like Nintendo in gaming and Panasonic in the digital device, and then for sports. So we just started a program called Sports Tech Tokyo, which is the sort of accelerator between sports team and league and technology company aiming to work with the sports league.
Excellent. Michael.
Hey, so my name is Michael Cheung. I run a venture capital fund called Makers Fund, and we essentially are a $200 million fund, and we focus on the kind of intersection of interactivity and entertainment industry. So we look a lot at gaming industry, entertainment industry, music industry, and really focusing on where we're seeing kind of the interactivity of that content or the medium or the platform, and we look at that globally, right? So we're really focused in the US, in Europe, and increasingly now Asia, specifically Japan, Korea, and now Southeast Asia, having personally moved to Singapore 6 months ago.
Let me pick up on that. I mean, the focus from an investor perspective in Asia, again, let's just define Asia very much in terms of first world Asia, sort of parts of China, Korea, Japan, very different, and then Southeast Asia. What are the 2 or 3 factors that you find are making this geography investable in your estimation? Is it demographics? Is it social habits? Is it mobile phones? Whatever the case. What are the 2 or 3 things that you're actually going back to your LPs and saying, give me another $100 because I believe there's stuff out there that we can fix?
Yeah, I mean, for Asia, we only invested in Japan so far. So I talk about in Japan. The use of my own company, computer vision software company, back in 2002, long time. At the time, like a startup ecosystem in Japan was so small. But now, last year was $1.3 billion, which is, smaller, much smaller than, China and US, but it's almost like a double from 2015. So venture investment in Japan is growing. And then as you know, Japan is still like most of people work in big company, but I see so many young talent from a top university like Tokyo University and some others, started launching their own company. So huge amount of money comes in, and the young talent started a new company. So that's the big reason we started investing in Japanese market.
Billion seems a bit small compared to China, William.
So we don't focus on first world or high-end Asia. We focused on kind of low-end Asia, I guess. So we look at mobile-first, mobile-only markets. So where the person's first experience on the internet is on a mobile phone, or their only experience on the internet. So our first market is China. We started 10 years ago with China Accelerator. Second market is India, then Indonesia. And we're helping companies from around the world penetrate these markets. These markets are not easy to get into. The other problem is you got Google, Facebook, Amazon, 5 Chinese guys, and people who raise money from SoftBank basically dominating the market. So for entrepreneurs, it's very, very difficult when your customer acquisition cost is high because of Google and Facebook, and your revenue is low because of Google and Facebook. So what we're trying to do is actually create a decentralized ecosystem, not on a blockchain, but just a decentralized ecosystem where people cross-promote each other. And we also partner with companies like telcos, actually retail chains, shopping malls, anybody who's getting kind of screwed over by the big guys, the big internet players.
But who also have access to scale, network effects, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so they, in return for promoting our apps, we give them revenue share, we give them a recurring revenue stream. So similar to what WeChat has, all those little services, or what Xiaomi has.
Yeah. So to summarize, it's mobile-centric, emerging markets Asia, but very much looking at network ecosystems away from the FANGs to actually create mutually beneficial relationships.
Yeah, it's a little complicated, but the problem is that advertising-based revenue models don't really work so well, especially in these mobile-first markets. So the way we make money is usually games or e-commerce, like selling product, helping people sell product, and then finally, actually, financial services work out quite well. So we have like media companies, but the way they actually monetize is through promoting loans, which might not seem completely intuitive, but it works.
Well, it works. Let me come back to that. Michael, what's driving Asia? What's driving making Asia investable?
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear across all the industries, right? It's scale and it's distribution, right? Like being mobile first means distribution's a lot easier. The scale's clearly very exciting from China, Indonesia, Thailand, etc. And the growth is there, right? So it's purely a matter of timing. Like we're in this market now where I think the payment walls are being broken down, distribution's a lot easier, smartphone ownership is at an all-time high. And so therefore that creates like this perfect ecosystem, I think, where not even just startups, also corporates, I think, are really benefiting from finally being able to access some of these markets. But to William's point, I think it still requires quite a lot of local operational expertise, or even just navigating the markets, navigating the monopolies. And I think that's the tricky part, right? And that's why I think still the local businesses are thriving the most. However, there are still good opportunities for disruptors to enter internationally, and that's kind of where we focus as well.
So you spoke about scale, you spoke about distribution, but we also spoken about heterogeneity. India is very different from China, is very different from Indonesia. As a principle, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that mix, that certain portfolio companies are looking at certain markets where the definition of risk might vary between one and the other? Or is risk and you fundamentally mitigate that by some kind of fancy modeling? Is there a nuts and bolts in the weeds view of how do you deal with 3 large markets being large enough, but also being quite different in many ways?
I mean, so we're a VC fund, but there are many VCs. Actually, people usually think there's many startups and few VCs. There's many VCs, there's few good startups, okay? So we have to chase companies around, so every VC tries to differentiate. The way we differentiate is that we actually run accelerator programs to help, and it's a cross-border accelerator. So we help companies that are in one market expand into another market through support. So that's how we deliver the value to the companies. It's not easy. I mean, most of our companies, the first market they went into, it's fine. Their home market is fine, and then they go into another market and they'll fail. And then maybe the third market they go into, they'll succeed. We generally try and stay away from Singapore, for example, because Singapore is very different than most of the rest of the world. Things like e-commerce is quite different here, and also anything that works here is non-transferable to the rest of the world.
Yeah. So you
go ahead, Doctor.
Sorry, do you cross-border accelerator help a company go to the other country?
Yes. So that's our service. So we invest in companies all around the world, and then we help them penetrate China. Not easy. We've advised companies like Evernote and Airbnb, but our companies are generally earlier stage. They usually have revenue, but they're not that big. And then the same for India, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam a little bit.
I got it.
Yeah.
So you actually grow the competency of those founding teams to actually go into multiple markets. Talk to me about your T-shirt. Talk to me about the participants in the accelerator. How have they changed? How is the nature of the entrepreneur over the last decade and a bit? How's that changed in your experience?
So I think people have realized that unless you're in China or North America, your home market is too small to build a real business. I mean, you can have a nice lifestyle business, and there's nothing wrong with making millions of dollars and having a nice life. But most people, you shouldn't take our money, because if you take our money, it implies that you want to build a very large company. And with that comes quite a lot of risk. But if you believe that you can build a large company and you take the VC money, then our goal is to try and help you get there, but it is quite a lot of risk. So think about a VC. I mean, we're early stage, but a later stage VC, they're investing $5 million. They're hoping to get $50 million back or something like that. So they own 20%. So that implies that you're a $500 million company. There are not that many $500, $600 million companies in the world. And the thing is, in a VC portfolio, if you have every 10 companies, there might be one or two that are the good ones. So that VC is going to spend their time on the one or two good ones, and the other 8 are basically sort of they don't pay very much attention to them. Yeah. So you have to keep an open mind and open. You need to be aware of the VC business model when you work with us. We're a little bit different because we're early stage.
Yeah.
So we're not unicorn hunting. We make money if a company exits for $50 million. We're happy with that.
Yeah. But I guess you have sort of the smaller ticket price, less at stake, but your definition of success is probably missing 1 0 compared to a unicorn. Michael, you divide your time between Europe and Asia. What's been your experience in terms of entrepreneurs, the way they look at VCs, the way they try and work out their own fit with the VC? Is that quite different?
Yeah, no, I think, so to compare Europe, for example, there's actually quite a lot of interesting difference, I think, between the maturity of the entrepreneurs and those that we see in Asia. In Europe, I think it's rapidly getting more mature, the investment environment, and also the kind of insider knowledge that entrepreneurs have for what to expect from their investors, right? I think one of the issues is previously in Europe, it's still been this quite old money environment, and you still see this in Asia where a family office or a very wealthy individual will invest into a startup, but then the terms of that investment may not necessarily be most favorable for the entrepreneur. I think Europe's in a place now where that's mostly out, and it's matured like the US, where I think it's getting increasingly founder friendly. So I think Asia, at least from what I've seen, it's still very local investment based, right? So Chinese funds were really focused on China. Southeast Asia funds, maybe that's more regional, but it's still, I've seen Indonesia, for example, a lot of it's local, right? Singapore tends to be more regional, but the problem with Singapore, I think, is that companies that are in Singapore, they tend to use it as a base for the rest of Southeast Asia. So I think hopefully it will rapidly kind of mature and change just like Europe, right? So there's a lot of European funds that will invest across the whole of Europe. not necessarily just in the country or the region that they're based in.
Domicile.
Yeah.
Interesting. The scale, the joke always in London is that, in the US you have Silicon Valley. In London you have the Silicon Roundabout. It's sort of, the scale is almost a fraction of what the ambition might seem like. Dakshan, it's been interesting in terms of what you've done in the sports space with Sports Tech Tokyo.
Yep.
Talk us through at a high level what that program is. What was your intent?
Okay.
And what's been your sort of outcomes from that? Where do you stand? What next?
Yeah, I think it was 2015. I attended Los Angeles Dodgers Accelerator in Los Angeles. That was the sports accelerator led by Los Angeles Dodgers, which they opened up the asset like a stadium, team, and the funds for the startups. And obviously Tokyo Olympic is coming in 2020, and I got the idea from Dodgers and wanted to do this in Japan, and I spoke with our partner Dentsu, which is the biggest sports agency,
Media agency,
in Asia. So that's the origin of Sports Tech Tokyo, which is sort of accelerator in sports tech. And idea is like bringing corporate partner like SoftBank, which has the largest sports team in Japan, and the basketball league in Japan, and the Sony Music, one of our entertainment company, and the Microsoft and some other partner. But also we have the league and the team in the many sports. We just started the Sports Tech Tokyo last year, and they got 300-something applications around the world, and they selected first finalists, 12 companies last year, and help those finalists to work with the sports league and team in our community.
Excellent. Talk us through how do you actually whittle down the applicants who are actually applying for the accelerator, and what are the broad frameworks you're looking at for them to qualify or not? Maybe perhaps start with you, William, and then come to Dakshan and Michael.
Okay, so we work with companies that already generally have revenue, because there's no point in going into a new market if you haven't done something in your home market. So they have a bit of revenue. Some about 10 to 20% are actually already break even, but they're still startups. And then the key thing for us is what's the problem that they're solving. So I'll give you an example. We just had this amazing esports panel up here, and one of the biggest problems that they were talking about is there's no data. So we invested in actually the number one, according to most of the media, data player for esports, basically the Nielsen of esports. Okay. But it's also the Nielsen of esports plus the Google Analytics of esports, and actually maybe AdMob. They can also do advertising as well.
What's the company called?
It's rebranded to Esports Charts.
Okay.
It used to be called ESM.
Okay.
But if it's quoted by the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and everybody whenever they want to talk about it. The major challenge here is the audience for esports is the same as the NBA. Give or take. But NBA makes $8 billion a year, give or take. And Esports Charts is, it's growing very quickly, but it's around $1 billion. And, the major challenge is the data. So we have the data. We can show that advertising through esports, on average, has a 5 times higher ROI than Facebook ads.
So measurement, transparency. Yeah, okay.
So, not all esports channels are created equal, but, we actually know that. So how do you unlock that value for the entire industry? It's through sort of companies like that. So they came through a referral because they kept on coming to China, and they had a lot of parties and stuff, but they couldn't get any business done. But they knew that there was demand because some random person sent them a cold email saying, hey, can we have this tiny little data slice on China? And they would usually give that data away for free. And so they had their intern write back and said, okay, $2,000, we'll send it to you. Now the problem is that the intern screwed up and added an extra zero and said $20,000. And we'll send you the data. And the Chinese company, no problem, here's 20 grand, give us the data. So they're like, oh, maybe we should spend a little bit more time turning this thing into an actual product. because these guys are super gaming geeks, and they're all from Kiev, like hardcore programmers, and they don't really know how to sell that well. So we're surrounding them with mentors, and we're starting to productize this.
And that intern's now become the chief revenue officer, I guess.
Yeah, well, he's setting the pricing.
Michael, what's your sieve? What's your sieve in terms of calibrating? You come in Series A downwards, or sort of you come in earlier than that? And what's your sort of filtration process?
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar actually from what William was talking about, just in terms of the global scale. I mean, one of the reasons why we're very interested in the interactive entertainment industry and why we dedicated an entire fund to it is because it can be a global industry. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, one needs to first work in the core market first, but let's say, for example, a gaming company or a gaming studio, by default, by selling the game on Steam or an Epic Store, they're already serving most of the Western markets, right? The US, Europe. Then what they need to do is just figure out what's the approach for the more regulated markets like China or Southeast Asia. So really what we're focused on is companies where they're working on creating something completely innovative or completely new, where we believe we have strong conviction that it's the kind of next growth for the industry. And that's something where I think it's very important to be kind of thesis driven. So we always, rather than being kind of more opportunistic, we try to kind of every 6 months look at the industry, see the direction of where things are going from gaming, music, entertainment, have a kind of a bet on what we think the next 18 to 24 months and where it's going to go, and then essentially find the best possible companies that are working on that, right? And we don't really care whether that company is in Europe or US.
Geography agnostic, it's kind of...
I think the key thing is it's the best team for it, and more importantly, there's value add from us to actually help them, for example, scale into Asia, right, or scale into the US from Europe.
Sure. Dakshan, Scrum has also been in an enterprise tech and a consumer tech business before. Yep. I'm just trying to think through, what's the best way of looking at opportunity, or the best way of sort of bucketing the opportunity? Is it sort of B2B, B2C, B2B2C? Is that one way of looking at it from an investor perspective? Or is it sort of your sort of, panning for gold vis-a-vis, sort of shovels and that kind of stuff? So is it a friction in the value chain that you're looking to solve? Or is there a large market which is there, which you're harvesting? I'm trying to think through for the audience, what is the best way of looking at an opportunity as a thesis, effectively, or a lens, so that you convince your investors, your LPs in many ways, saying, this is out there which has not been addressed, and that's what I'm going to address for it. I want you to actually invest me towards that. To talk us through how your story is towards an LP. And that's the long and short of the question I'm asking. You want to start?
I'll take half of that, okay. The first half. So so when you're trying to get a VC excited, most people, because they've been working on their product so much, start talking about their product. And usually that product will actually end up changing like 5 times before it's all done. Yep. So it's more important to talk about why we need the product. What's the challenge, or what's the opportunity, or what's the problem, and is that an interesting problem? And then also you need to kind of, especially in the early stage side, show that you're very, very, very passionate about this problem. Like you can't sleep at night because this problem is really bugging you, and you want to build a solution for it. And so focus on the why. And then, the what, the actual solution, probably less important, because as an early stage startup, it's going to change. And then it's also good to talk about your traction, because, ideas are like noses. Everyone has one. What really matters is that you've executed against it a little bit and at least done something. I mean, in a startup weekend, 54-hour event, people build and launch products. So if you say, oh, I'm raising money and then I'm going to build the product, you look kind of stupid. So don't say that. So the key thing is, what have you achieved to now? That shows that you're committed to this. Because it's like, oh, well, I'm waiting to quit my job to do the startup after I get funded. It's like, you're obviously not very passionate about this problem. If you were passionate, you would have quit your job and then go for it. And then the last thing is just get a co-founder or 2. Not 3, but 1 or 2 co-founders. Because if you can't convince somebody else, like there's product, tech, and selling stuff, talking, and if you can't convince somebody, a technical person, to join your team, that's also saying something about your ability to sell. Yeah.
Awesome.
Assuming that all of you are not tech people.
Michael.
Actually, I think nowadays the skill of storytelling is probably one of the most essential skills that I've ever kind of seen in the context of raising investment or raising funds. I mean, yes, not only do you need to be able to convince a co-founder to join you, but when an investor is investing in you, they also are thinking, hey, would this person actually be able to convince 10 engineers, 10 salespeople, 100 people maybe, but also even future investors, and ad infinitum, right? And I think that therefore, it's not really sales, because I think people tend to associate the word sales with, oh, well, I guess the business development, and they've worked here and there. I think it's telling the story of why you're working on something, what's the problem, and then being able to kind of tell that story from multiple different perspectives, right? And really drive the reason home why you're working on it and why they should be working on it with you, from an investor or a colleague perspective, right?
Takshan, what's been your experience about the 100-odd companies in Sports Tech Tokyo?
Actually, we use
Burning desire that William spoke about.
Actually, when I started the Scrum Venture in 2013, we are, category agnostic, investing from B2C to B2B. But I realized that, let's say like a Nintendo used to be really, difficult to work with. Sports team and the league, they are not like a tech savvy, so it was really difficult to work with. But through this program, I realized that even the sports team and league is now open for new innovation with tech and the innovation. So I think if you have the certain insight in the certain vertical like a sports and game entertainment, I think you have a chance to work with the corporate through like a B2B2C, not necessarily like a B2C directed to consumer. So I think that's a new trend, and then that's why we are doing the program like Sports Tech Tokyo.
Excellent. So we've talked about ideas which are big enough. Do you want to say something?
No, I'm just going to say, Takshan, I'm very curious to elaborate more also on how it's like working with the corporate. Like, what have you seen works when you say, because you have two different cultures, right? You have the corporate where there are many different managers in the middle, many different people to work with. You have the aspirational ambition of the leader, and then you have the 10 kind of VPs below him who you need to work with or her, who you need to work with every day. And then you have these young entrepreneurs who really just want to do everything. Like, what sort of collaboration models have you seen work?
Good point. Like, originally, we thought that, the later stage company, like they have a product and revenue, that company, should be suitable for, big corporate to work with. But eventually we learned that, they're looking for the early stage technology. Like obviously, executive need the, revenue and the product, but, even big corporate has a young, innovative team. They are looking for something new. And then from Sports Tech Tokyo, we had so many later stage company, but the young early stage company had a really good time left, like working with the big company. So this is still in the first year, so we are still learning. But like William mentioned, if you have passion and the ambition in technology, I think you can work with corporate.
Is there a trend which actually has sort of almost has the startups skewing two different buckets? Innovation heavy, but not able to monetize, or those who can monetize, but then that monetization is replicable to some extent. The moats aren't deep enough. Is that a common challenge, or is that more sort of less frequent for you guys? Because I got the sense from Sports Tech Tokyo that was the part of the challenge you were facing. Whereas I think, if you look at consumer internet or entertainment or gaming, those ecosystems are far more robust in that sense. Well,
I think sometimes the challenge is that people want to build this amazing, like fully formed product and then sell it. But that might take years. And as a startup, you generally only get money for a year, not multiple years. So there needs to be a kind of a step-by-step progression to get to your end goal. So like Net-a-Porter, right? My partner is now the CFO, and they started off, they wanted to be a lifestyle brand. and they wanted to be everything. But they started off with, Rent the Runway. They wanted to be this whole lifestyle e-commerce thing. But Rent the Runway started off as just renting out closets, right? So they started pretty small, and they started off pitching VCs who are all dudes. Okay, and those dudes understood that their wives generally had a very full closet of stuff that never got worn. So it was an easy pitch, right? Because the audience, it wasn't the user base, but the audience understood
they could relate
this
to it.
challenge, right? Mm-hmm. So if you try and sell like a male VC, like this whole vision of empowerment around women being confident and being able to dress well, it wouldn't work. But if you sell the pitch of you can unlock all the assets in the closet, and then it kind of clicked. And there's a great, it's like How We Built This Guy Raz podcast. Highly recommend it. And it's a good story.
Excellent. Michael, any experiences in terms of this whole innovation, VC monetization? Any stories you've got from any of your portfolio companies you've met or invested in?
No. I mean, a lot of our companies end up working with either corporates that or larger conglomerates that we've paired them with deliberately to help them grow and expand and build a product, or alternatively, the ones where our LPs have worked together with them. So I think, to give you one example, we have, I would say, maybe 5 of our companies where they're gaming studios. And some of them working on content, some of them are working on kind of publishing. But the key thing that they kind of saw an opportunity in was, look, all of our sales right now come from the Western market. They're getting a lot of illegal sales from China, right? And they're recognizing some of the revenue, but there's a lot more that they can do. And rather than try to set up an office in China or hire a BD, hire a China GM, they actually wanted to work with a local publisher or a local company. So we started to pair them up with and have them conversations with the likes of Tencent, Perfect World, NetEase, and I think the key unlocker here was having someone bring you to the right person to talk to. And I think it's very, very easy to get lost in the myriad of kind of profiles and people who all have their various agendas and objectives in the kind of the corporates. And then I think the second thing was just being very, very clear on what they needed, right? Being able to pitch, I think, a Chinese publisher or a Chinese platform is very different from pitching, say, Facebook or Twitch, where I think the mindset and the prioritization is very different.
Interesting. Go on, William.
So we run what we call pilot accelerators for about 20 corporates, including 5 of the top 10 consumer products companies in the world. So we run innovation programs for J&J, Unilever, the number 2 that I'm not allowed to talk about, AB InBev and Nestle, for example. And we've done about 25 of these pilot accelerators, done about 85 paid pilots, about $20,000 a pilot. And we kind of learned a few things. It's not, if you have your startup, you don't really want to try and jam it into the corporate unless the corporate actually is requesting what you have. The scatter shot, trying to pitch everybody doesn't really work that well. Try and figure out who actually wants what you have at that time. And so we actually facilitate that. The second thing is don't do pilots unless you're actually ready to do a pilot. So products that aren't really ready yet, quote unquote ready, don't try and jam them in. They should be sort of 80 to 100% ready before the pilot. It'll also just be a waste of everybody's time, and you'll make yourself look bad in front of the corporate. And then secondly, the third thing is that most corporates will end up using you, and it's like a brain leech, and they just suck all the information out of you, and you get nothing. So you actually need to make sure that the people on their side have skin in the game, like the business unit put up the money, not the innovation department, or that the innovation department has enough power within the company to actually get a trigger pulled. So we've got 40% of our pilots are successful, but only 35. But only 15 of them converted to commercial, which we should try and improve.
That's still pretty good. That's not 30%. That's quite good. Any questions from the floor or comments before I sort of go to the next part, which will be towards the end? Okay, let's talk business models, because I think you referred to advertising does not work, therefore you sort of tend to work much more on a rev share basis. What is the next thing in terms of using old means of making money and those models, which are still applicable in the world of gaming, sport, and entertainment? And what might be the new emerging models which are already existing that you feel actually are going to provide the bulk of the monetization? Let's talk money.
So just be open-minded. So the traditional way of making money on whatever special thing that you have might be a little bit different. So, this doesn't play in Europe because there's GDPR.
Yeah.
For example, we have 6 media apps in India. We control Xiaomi Mi Video. We run Samsung's video app. A lot of users, and we actually control the content. So if anybody wants to put content on Samsung or Xiaomi, the number 2 and the number 1 cell phone brands in India, let me know. But the way that you make money might not be the traditional advertising base. So we put tracking inside all of our apps, and we can use that unstructured data to then credit score the users and offer them small loans. And that makes a lot more money than, for example, a Google ad or a Facebook ad.
So you're almost using content to actually engage and get a deeper insight into a segment, and then you end up selling them services, which is way beyond the original sort of entertainment experience that you were getting.
Yeah, and it's not like there's a content and then there's like a lone ad in there. They might see the ad somewhere else. So
it's relevant to them.
Yeah.
Based on the insight. Michael?
I think one interesting example to talk about also is, for example, engagement, right? Trying to monetize engagement. So we have one company called Genvid. They're based out of the US. And what they do is they provide technology that allows you to make your stream or broadcast interactive. So they're partnering with, for example, sports providers, for example, the J League in Japan, and they're enabling users or viewers of the stream to directly interact with the stream. So that means, for example, you could be changing the camera angle, pay a premium subscription, and be able to change the camera angle or see certain stats. Or, for example, microtransactions. So they'll say, okay, if you want to pay 30 cents, then you can basically put like a bullet message across the screen. And I think this method of engagement and interactivity is quite interesting for the rights holders, because what they're struggling with is kind of difficulty in monetization of license fees and broadcast fees, and so this is kind of like a new revenue stream that's unlocked for them. Of course, this same technology also applies for gaming, applies for any kind of broadcasting, especially as I think we move more towards streaming for content. So I think this kind of approach is also quite interesting, and of course you have the free-to-play mechanics with other kind of gaming companies, but also loot box and this kind of thing. So I think advertising-centric models are probably here to stay, but it's more about diversification of monetization viable strategies.
Interesting. Takshan, my question to you on monetization is a bit different. How do you manage, sort of to Michael's earlier point, how do you manage the business model or the monetization strategy of a early stage business? And how, if that's not aligning with the company with which they are working or the company which is invested in them?
Oh, you mean the company corporate?
Correct, yes, on the corporate side. Is that something that you've come across whereby the way these guys are monetizing is quite different to the way the company would actually manage on their books? Is that more of an accounting issue, or it's not, you haven't seen that kind of an issue too much? Their openness to new business models and adopting them.
The William mentioned that, again, this is still, first year, just, close the, the finalists. So, we have to see how, the big corporate and the startups working in Sports Tech Tokyo, but it's hard to say. They just signed the POC and just the beginning. So.
Okay, so let's try and sort of begin to wrap up. I guess 2 questions, and you can pick both, or you can answer one. A year from now, what might we be talking on this stage? And 5 years from now, what's it going to be like for you in terms of your business? So one is, a year from now, what are the new trends that you believe will mature and become trends? And 5 years from now, how would what you're doing right now change in terms of where the value is going to be at?
I'm super interested in virtual influencers.
Virtual influencers?
Yes.
Unpack that for us briefly.
Yeah. So what virtual influencers is essentially the automation and creation of influencers that are purely virtual and do not exist. So there is this interesting trend in Japan called VTubers, and so essentially what it is it is a character who doesn't exist, and they're controlled by, it can either be controlled by software, controlled by a person, and you're kind of doing motion capture, but then that person is a content creator. And it also means that that content creator can also be, or that content creator can be scaled, right? Because one of the biggest issues of content creation via influencers today is that, it's time, it's controlling it, it's kind of all these branding risks that happen, all these controversies. So what if you could scale the creation of that, right? And you're starting to see a few examples in the US as well, like Little Michaela. So what I'm kind of tracking very closely is 5 years from now, are we going to see machine learning creating influencers that don't really exist but can really resonate with whatever their target audience is, right? And it can be niche, it can be mainstream or what. But even if you look at VTubers today, virtual YouTubers, they're already generating millions and millions of followers, right? The biggest one is Kazuna Ai, right? She has, I think, something 8 million followers, and international, right? Even though it's a Japanese company and she doesn't speak English, one of the biggest fan bases is based in the US. So, I expect this trend to continue, particularly in Asia, where I think there is a bit more resonance towards it as well, in China particularly.
Excellent. Tak-san.
Yeah, I'm looking at the virtual, influencer too. But, for the sports, again, still the beginning, but I want to, invest in the startup which changing the sports itself. Last week I played the golf, first time in the past 23 years. And then I realized that, the golf is totally new compared to 3 years ago. And one of my friends, using the, startup product, the sensor, at the edge of, golf club. And then every time you swing, like all the swing with the sensor and the GPS, automatically track to the smartphone data. So you don't have to take a memo or whatever, but all the data will be integrated in the smartphone, and that's totally changed the way we plan and play the golf. And the other friends, also using the technology for the golfing, which is a company called the Club Champion, which like a club fitting company integrated with the radar technology. TrackMan, which is the really popular for the baseball stadium, like a radar to track pitch and the hitting. But also the Club Championship implemented this technology for the golf fitting. And then you can track your swing and the ball with the radar, and then you get the perfect the fitting by using radar analysis. So I saw the two evolution in the golf sports. So golf itself is not changed, same rule, but with the technology in the sensor and the radar, I feel like the golf is the totally new experience.
Using data as to create a first-person sporting experience, which is quite different.
That's true. So hopefully we want to do something in many other sports in the sports sector here.
William, the last word.
So we've done 2 investments, one in China, one in India, in and around this sort of concept of like everybody's a star or everybody's an influencer. Now, generally they're actually quite awful. But their friends don't mind. So if anybody can actually do a live show gig in a venue, all they have to do is sell the tickets themselves. They're like $1 a piece. So if you can convince 40 of your friends to give $1 each, or you just put up the $40 yourself, then you can get on stage. And then, of course, we're recording it, we're live streaming it, and these people might, if they don't suck that badly, build up a follower beyond their friends, a following beyond their friends. But there's a lot of revenue models around sort of an individual's influence, and you can actually make quite a decent amount of money, even if you only have like 1,000 friends or 2,000 friends or 5,000 friends. So we're looking at this now. The vast, 99.999% of these people will probably go nowhere in terms of becoming a star. But maybe we'll have like one success a year, and that would be quite great for content discovery. Yeah. But there is a huge amount of influence, personal influence, that we're tapping into.
Great. William, Tak-san, and Michael have come from a long way and given lots of your time. Thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.